We'd like to start by inviting you listeners to join us here at Redemption Life Center. We are located at 28906 East Admiral Place in Catoosa, Oklahoma. Our service times are Sundays at 10:30 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. We'd also like to invite you to team up with us in sending out our messages on YouTube, or you can get copies of our messages by mailing donations to Redemption Life Center in care of P.O. Box 1304, Catoosa, Oklahoma 74015. May God richly bless you. We hope you continue to join us as we learn our identity in Christ and seek the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Today, we are going to continue with our studies that we've been doing on Proverbs, and we are going to study Proverbs Chapter 21. And what we have been doing throughout this study is we've been taking a few verses at a time and reading them in 3 different versions. Dave reads it in the King James Version, Josie reads it in the Living Word, and I've been reading it in the Amplified. And we are going, and then we stop for a minute and make comments. We comment on what jumps out at us. We comment on whatever God gives us to. It may be something you haven't heard, and then again, it may be something you already know, and it's just a reminder. So I hope you will enjoy our lesson today. All right, Dave, would you start with verse 1 and go through verse 10 in chapter 21 of Proverbs, please?
The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord pondereth the hearts. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. An high look and a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked is sin. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of every one that is hasty only to want. The getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a vanity, tossed to and fro of them that seek death. The robbery of the wicked shall destroy them, because they refused to do judgment. The way of man is froward and strange, but as for the pure, his work is right. It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. The soul of the wicked desireth evil. His neighbor findeth no favor in his eyes.
Thank you for that. Josie, would you read the same 10 verses, please, in the Living Word?
Just as water is turned into irrigation ditches, so the Lord directs the king's thoughts. He turns them wherever he wants to. We can justify our every deed, but God looks at all our motives. God is more pleased when we are just and fair than when we give him gifts. Pride, lust, and evil actions are all sin. Steady plotting brings prosperity. Hasty speculation brings poverty. Dishonest gain will never last, so why take the risk? Because the wicked are unfair, their violence boomerangs and destroys them. A man is known by his actions. An evil man lives an evil life. A good man lives a godly life. It is better to live in the corner of an attic than with a crabby woman in a lovely home. An evil man loves to harm others. Being a good neighbor is out of his line.
Thank you. Now we'll read out of the Amplified. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as are the watercourses. He turns it whichever way he wills. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs and tries the hearts. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Haughtiness of eyes and a proud heart, even the tillage of the wicked or the lamp of joy to them, whatever it may be, are sin in God's eyes. The thoughts of the steadily diligent tend only to plenteousness, but everyone who is impatient and hasty hastens only to want. Securing treasures by a lying tongue is a vapor driven to and fro. Those who seek them seek death. The violence of the wicked shall sweep them away because they refuse to do justice. The way of the guilty is exceedingly crooked, but as for the pure, his work is right, and his conduct is straight. It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop on the flat oriental roof, exposed to all kinds of weather, than in a house shared with a nagging, quarrelsome, and fault-finding woman. The soul or life of the wicked craves and seeks evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes. All right, what comments do we have? Anything in particular stick out to you or mean anything special to you, or do you have a comment on it? Well, I'll go on ahead and say some of my comments, and if you two think of any, just go ahead and intercede whenever. It's, of course, it's all good. It came from the Lord. It was inspired of God. But the second verse kind of sticks out to me because we all like to think we're right. And sometimes we're wrong, but we don't like to consider that we might be wrong. And but the Lord, He weighs what's on our heart, and He knows the truth of the matter. And I think that's very good. I have known people, and maybe you have too, who thought they could disobey God as long as they did some kind of a sacrifice. Like, I'm going to put an extra $100 in the offering today because I knew this was against God's will, but I went on ahead and did it anyway, and then they list whatever it is they did that they weren't supposed to do. Well, disobeying God is more displeasing to Him. And giving a gift will not undo that displeasure. So we just need, you can't buy God. You can't excuse especially the mistakes that you make when you know better, by making what is to you a sacrifice. It doesn't have any it doesn't have any worth in God's eyes. But sacrifice doesn't. You guys got any comments yet? I think I'm going to do the next 10 a little bit different. I think I'm going to do it one verse at a time. And then verse 4, even when the wicked do something that to them they think is good, because of their wrong attitudes and prideful ways, it is not pleasing to God, even though it may be pleasing to them. I really like verse 5. The thoughts of the steadily diligent tend only to plenteousness, But everyone who is impatient and hasty hastens only to want. When we stop and we think and we consider and we make plans and we examine our motives and our ways, we are more likely to choose the right way to do something and therefore have rewards that follow that, have successes and victories. But when we do things in a hurry, we are more likely to make wrong choices, which end up with bad results, is what I get out of that one. And verse 9, whether we're talking about a woman living with a man or a man, or a husband and wife or whatever, it's if one of them is trying to do right things and one is doing wrong things, if one of them is trying to be peaceful and the other one is just never to be pleased, they're always finding fault with the other one, that does not make for a very good home. Even if you live in a fancy house, there's people out there who they don't have a whole lot of money, they don't live in the best house in the world, but they have peace in their home because they do things God's way and they try to honor each other. And so things turn out good for them, but it's misery for both parties in the one where somebody is just never pleased. And I'm sure we all can think of at least one person we know who, no matter what you do, they don't think it's the right way to do it. Now, on down the road, they may come up with the same idea that you did, that they said was terrible, and claim it as their own, and then all of a sudden it's a good idea. But they're never happy. The ones that are never seem to be pleased about things, they are hard to have a relationship with. And that many times heads married people to the divorce court when one of them's like that all the time. That's just not the way to be. Grumpy. And look at the children of Israel. They had to stay in the wilderness for 40 years when it was an 11-day trip because they couldn't be happy. First they were hungry. They got manna. They were happy with the manna for a short period of time, and all of a sudden all they were doing was griping and griping about the manna. I mean, every time they turned around, they were griping about something instead of being thankful for what they had. They looked at the negative instead of the positive. And if you want to have a more blessed life, it's wise. It's okay to be aware of the negative in the world around you. But when you dwell on that, it keeps you in a bad spot. And so we need to dwell on God and know that He is bigger than any problem we have. He's bigger than any problem the world has. And we need to be grateful that He is for us, because when God's for us, who can be against us and win? They can't. They can't win in the end. They may look like they are at the beginning, but in the end, they will not have the victory. And then, anyway, I'm sure you can think of more things out of those 10 verses. Let's do it one verse at a time this time and see how that works out, okay? Verse 11, Dave.
When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise, and when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge.
Josie?
The wise man learns by listening. The simpleton can learn only by seeing scorners punished.
Okay. And then mine says, when the scoffer is punished, the fool gets a lesson in being wise. But men of godly wisdom and good sense learn by being instructed. Do we have any comments on that verse?
Speaks for itself.
This is true. Yeah. Wise people learn from things that happen to them and to others. The foolish don't. All right, verse 12, Dave.
The righteous man wisely considereth the house of the wicked, but God overthroweth the wicked for their wickedness.
Okay, Josie.
God, the righteous one, knows what is going on in the homes of the wicked and will bring the wicked to judgment.
Okay, that's good. The uncompromisingly righteous man considers well the house of the wicked, how the wicked are cast down to ruin. We can notice the actions of others and notice how things don't work so well for them when they have wicked motives and wicked actions. And that's what I get out of that one. Dave, if you have a comment on verse 12, go for it. Otherwise, go ahead and read 13, please.
Well, 12 and 11 just shows you both ways. When people see the lives of someone else and the consequences, well, you learn.
That's right. Very good.
Verse 13. Whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard.
Josie?
He who shuts his ears to the cries of the poor will be ignored in his own time of need.
Okay. Whoever stops his ears at the cry of the poor will cry out himself and not be heard. So it's almost the same in all three of them. It reminds me of the Good Samaritan. All these self-righteous people saw this poor man who had been beaten and left on the side of the road, and they walked on the other side of the road and acted like they didn't even see him. Of course, it was quite evident that they couldn't miss him. And then here comes the Samaritan, and even though in the eyes of the religious, he wasn't supposed to have anything to do with the man who'd gotten beaten up, who was a Jew, and if I understood correctly, and he helped him. He stopped and helped him. Not only did he help him, but any expenses that were made in order to take care of him, he paid for. And so God will bless those who, when they see a need, they find a way to help in that situation. Whereas those who see a need and ignore it, it's a whole different story. And there may come a time when they have a need and it's not met, and they'll be wondering, how come you're not answering my prayer, God? Well, you knew better way back when. Could that possibly be a reason? Maybe. Anyway, unless God's mercy takes over. All right, let's go to any other comments on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another way of looking at 13 is the poor, for whatever reason, we think it's just them. It can never happen to us. But when you look at what caused the person to be poor or on the street or whatever, and people are walking by, well, the same thing is going to happen to them eventually also.
That
'Cause-
does seem the way it works, yeah.
Because, why is that person on the street? What caused that? Well, it has a beginning. The cause of it has a beginning, and then it just gets worse, and everybody will be on the street. And then God will have to use someone to change that.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing to consider, and I hadn't thought of looking at it that way, but yeah. All right. You want to go ahead and read verse 14?
A gift in secret pacifieth anger, and a reward in the bosom strong wrath.
Okay, Josie.
An angry man is silenced by giving him a gift.
And mine is, a gift in secret pacifies and turns away anger, and a bribe in the lap strong wrath. All right. Anybody want to comment on that verse?
On 14, I have done that, and it does get to the person that's been angry at you.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe at no reason, they're just angry people. They might not even be angry at you. I mean, and then if you treat them nice, they wonder why or whatever, or you're giving a good example anyway.
Giving good for evil, which has a way of doing wonderful things. Do you have another comment to make, or? Okay. Any other comments on that? All right, Dave, you want to read verse 15, please?
It is joy to the just to do judgment, but destruction shall be to the workers of iniquity.
Josie?
A good man loves justice, but it is a calamity to evildoers.
Okay. When justice is done, it is a joy to the righteous, the upright, in right standing with God. But to the evildoer, it is dismay, calamity, and ruin. Any comments for that one?
Speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's true. The evildoers don't like it when the righteous try to do what's right. They don't really like it. All right. Verse 16, Brother Dave.
The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead.
Josie.
The man who strays away from common sense will end up dead.
A man who wanders out of the way of understanding shall abide in the congregation of the spirits of the dead. Any comments from anybody?
Well, on 16, that means, like, people are really smart nowadays. A lot of the younger people, they're getting smarter and smarter with technology and all that. But he's got to come down to the level of common sense sometimes. Mm-hmm. Instead of just technology and that it can fail, their minds can not can deceive their heart.
Mhm. Yes, you're right. You got anything to say about that, Dave? If not, go on to 17.
He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich.
Josie?
A man who loves pleasure becomes poor. Wine and luxury are not the way to riches.
Okay. He who loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. Comments?
Well, you can't let your pleasure go beyond your what you need to do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
your what is it called?
Your means,
Yeah.
maybe? Yeah.
Well, I meant it can't go beyond your faculties of knowing good and evil. You know,
Mhm.
your mind.
Yeah. You can't let it have precedence over what you know is right.
Yeah, and wine, you know, can get to you. I mean, if you have too much wine, it's not very good.
Yeah.
I mean, it can make you not do your responsibilities
Right.
or know your responsibilities.
It
Comes
almost,
out of your head there.
the wine and the oil could almost be considered cousin to greed. You know, if they like it so much that they'll spend more money than they should on the wine and the oil or whatever it is that they see that they want, then they don't have what they need to have for the needs and the necessary things. And that could be part of that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right, Dave, will you read verse 18?
The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the transgressor for the upright.
Okay, Josie?
The wicked will finally lose. The righteous will finally win.
Okay, and mine says...
Well, right will always prevail.
Yes. And mine says, the wicked become a ransom for the uncompromisingly righteous, and the treacherous for the upright, because the wicked themselves fall into the traps and pits that they dug for the good. Yeah, I agree with you. The righteousness will prevail. Any other comments?
Isn't that talking about the righteous is delivered out of trouble, and then the wicked come along and fill in that space where the trouble is?
That's a good comment, yes.
So it's almost like taking the attention off of you, and everybody starts looking at the other person.
Very good. All right, would you like to read verse 19, please?
It is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman.
Okay, sounds like a verse we've already discussed to a certain degree. All right, Josie?
Better to live in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining woman.
Mm-hmm. It is better to dwell in a desert land than with a contentious woman and with vexation. There's another verse that I'm thinking of, and I think it's in Proverbs somewhere, something like a woman that's like that is, or it could be a man, but it says woman here, but because women are more emotional, so they tend to be more grapey sometimes. But compares it with the annoying drippy faucet, the leaky faucet that's always dripping, and you can't go to sleep because it's drip, drip, drip. It's like, oh, well, sometimes women who are like that can be even worse than a leaky faucet. That's my comment.
That other scripture comes to my mind. He who finds a wife findeth a good thing. Well, not every woman is a marrying kind. So
True.
So you don't want to be married to someone who is going to be contentious and angry and whatever. So it's better to find one who would be a good wife.
And if you can't find one of them, it'd be better to be by yourself, which is the desert, so to speak. I know I have known people to get married because they wanted to be married. And wasn't long they were having a divorce because, number one, they didn't seek the counsel of God about it. Number two, they had the wrong reason for getting married. And number three, they were in a hurry to get married. They weren't being patient for God to bring the right one in their pathway. And so, anyway, that was not a good deal. Okay. Are we ready for verse 20?
I think if she,
Oh.
well, I'll go ahead. About, what was it, 19. I think that the complaining woman isn't really a godly woman, because godly women really, if they do complain, they repent, they're more apt to not complain, if they know what they need to know. And if they don't, they need to take them to church and let them listen to the Word.
There you go.
Especially Proverbs.
Yes, yes. It repeats enough things over and over in different ways that they ought to get it somehow along the line. Oh, goodness. All right, go ahead and read verse 20, if you would, please, Dave.
There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up.
Okay, Josie.
The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets.
Mm-hmm. There are precious treasures and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a self-confident and foolish man swallows it up and wastes it. That old saying, waste not. Let's see, how's it go? Have not, waste not, or no, waste not, want not. I think is how that works. If you're careful with what God has blessed you with, it will help you have what you need when you need it. It's like the virgins and the oil in their lamps. The ones who were careful with their oil and made sure they had not only what they needed now, but what they needed later, they were in a good place when the bridegroom came. The other ones, they recognized right off that they had wasted and didn't have what they needed for the future, and they were trying to get the ones who had prepared to cover them with what they lacked. And the virgins said, no, we did what we were supposed to do. You go do what you're supposed to do, and then maybe you'll have what you need when you need it. You know, they didn't like that too well. They wanted somebody else to foot their bill. And I know we know of people who they go out, they get a job, they can get jobs readily, but when they get their money, they don't spend it right. And so therefore, they don't have what they need when they need it for paying their bills, their normal bills, just for living, for eating, for utilities, for whatever. And then they want somebody else to help them pay those bills. Well, when they do that over and over and over again, they don't learn their lesson. They don't need to be helped. They need to suffer the consequences, because they should make better decisions and prepare for their future, and not just say, oh, I want to go out to eat today. It doesn't matter if I have money for food for the rest of the week or not. I'm going to go eat at the restaurant today. You know, and that's just not preparing properly. That's not doing things God's way. And that's being foolish and swallowing it up and wasting it. So, any other comments? Okay, Dave, you want to read verse 21, please?
He that followeth after righteousness and mercy findeth life, righteousness, and honor.
That's a good one. Josie?
The man who tries to be good, loving, and kind finds life, righteousness, and honor.
He who earnestly seeks after and craves righteousness, mercy, and loving kindness will find life in addition to righteousness, uprightness, and right standing with God, and honor. Well, that makes sense. Any other comments? If not, Dave, will you read verse 22, please?
A wise man scaleth the city of the mighty, and casteth down the strength of the confidence thereof.
Okay.
The wise man conquers the strong man and levels his defenses.
A wise man scales the city walls of the mighty and brings down the stronghold in which they trust. Any comments?
Well, it just shows you that God will raise up men and women of God to bring down the wicked.
It also tells me the only thing and only one that we should put such strong trust in is God. The walls can be broken down. The men can be broken down. Things can happen to destroy our plans. But God is sure. And He is always the one we can trust. Any more comments before we go to verse 23? Okay, Dave.
Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles.
Josie?
Keep your mouth closed and you'll stay out of trouble.
And mine says, he who guards his mouth and his tongue keeps himself from troubles. Any comments?
Mind your own business.
That's a good one. I'm thinking of that verse where it says the tongue is little but hard to tame. And there's another verse that talks about
The rudder of a ship or something like that.
oh, rudder.
The rudder of a ship. I don't know. I can't. I was thinking of that, but I can't think of all of it. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't think of all of this one either, but there's a verse that talks about he who keeps quiet, keeps a hold of his tongue, appears to be wise, whereas the one who I'm not wording it right, this is a Judy version, but he who lets his tongue say whatever it wants to, opens his mouth, and everybody knows he's a fool now. There's no question about it. Something to that effect. But anyway, basically, self-control. We can be angry, but we don't let, if we have self-control, we don't let that anger spew words out of our mouth that don't need to be said. That sort of thing. Or actions that don't need to be done because we're angry. We can control our emotions and control our mouth, and that will keep us out of a lot of trouble. Okay, any more comments? Go ahead and say them, or we'll have Dave going ahead and do verse 24.
Verse 24. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath.
Okay, Josie.
Mockers are proud, haughty, and arrogant.
The proud and haughty man, scoffer is his name, deals and acts with overbearing pride. What comments do we have on that one? I'm thinking of the one who boasts usually ends up doing or saying something that puts him to shame because of his boasting. And I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's what comes to my mind. Okay, Dave, you want to go ahead and read verse 25?
The desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor.
Okay, Josie?
Well, mine is 25:26. So.
Oh, okay. Well, Dave, go on ahead and read 26, and then we'll have Josie read those two together.
He coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not.
The lazy man longs for many things, but his hands refuse to work. He is greedy to get, while the godly love to give.
Okay, the desire of the slothful kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. He covets greedily all the day long, but the uncompromisingly righteous gives and does not withhold. Any comments? What comes to mind to me is wishing doesn't get the job done. You have to put actions to work to get the job done. And those that just want to wish, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that, but they're not willing to do what's necessary to accomplish that, they're never going to get it. And that's what I get out of it. Any other comments on it?
Well, we do have a problem when...
Can you speak up? I can hardly hear you. Please.
We do have a problem when governments start bringing in people who are not being a benefit to this country or anybody else's country, and they end up on government assistance, and then you wonder why the country is going down the drain. Because the excuse is to bring in all these different people, because the amount of people being born isn't keeping the growth of the country going. So the excuse is to bring in all these other people to fill in the gap. But instead, they end up living off the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm. That kind of goes along with, we need to use wisdom in what we do, because if our heart's desire is to help somebody, it's not helping them by just giving them everything. If they have to do something to get what they get, they need to work. A laborer is worthy of their hire, but they can't expect to eat just because they want to eat. They need to earn their living. And when the government sets up a system that doesn't promote that, it gets people the idea that they are owed, because they're alive, they need to be fed, not because they've done all they can do and can do no more. They're not doing their part. God usually gives us a part to play in things. And when we don't do the part that we're supposed to, it doesn't work. All right. Dave, will you go on ahead and read verse 27, please?
The sacrifice of the wicked is abomination. How much more when he bringeth it with a wicked mind?
Okay, Josie.
God loathes the gifts of evil men, especially if they are trying to bribe him.
So he loathes it, is that what you said? Loathes it, yeah. Okay.
He hates it.
Yeah, he doesn't like it. It's more than not like. It's loathe. The loathe is stronger. All right. The sacrifice of the wicked is exceedingly disgusting and abhorrent to the Lord. How much more when he brings it with evil intentions? Any comments?
Well, it's pretending is one thing, but pretending with an agenda is something else. It's worse.
God is more concerned with our reasons why we're doing things than what we're doing. Doesn't mean he doesn't consider what we're doing. But if we are doing it with evil intentions, that makes whatever we're doing when it is wrong more wrong. That's what I get out of there. God's definitely not happy with that kind of behavior. All right, Dave, you want to read 28, please?
A false witness shall perish, but the man that heareth speaketh constantly.
No one believes a liar, but everyone respects the words of an honest man.
Right? A false witness will perish, but the word of a man who hears attentively will endure and go unchallenged. When you have the reputation of being a good man, and when you say something it's worth listening to, they're going to stop and listen. But when you have the reputation of telling lies, there will come a time when people won't pay any attention to what that liar says. Got any more comments? Reminds me of the story of the little boy that cried wolf. You remember that story? And when he cried wolf when there was no wolf, because he thought it was funny for everybody to come running to help him when they thought there was a wolf after the sheep. Well, finally, one day, he cried wolf because there really was a wolf. And everybody's going, oh, he's just going to laugh at us because he's just tricking us again, and they didn't come. So then, if I understand correctly, the wolf not only devoured the sheep, but devoured the boy too. You know, so it's not good to tell lies. People will eventually realize you're lying, and they won't pay any attention to you. Then even when you tell the truth, they don't listen. That could be really bad. All right, unless there's another comment, Dave, would you like to read verse 29, please?
A wicked man hardeneth his face, but as for the upright, he directeth his way.
An evil man is stubborn, but a godly man will reconsider.
A wicked man puts on the bold, unfeeling face of guilt, but as for the upright, he considers, directs, and establishes his way with the confidence of integrity. Comments? A wicked man, whether he believes it or not, will declare he's right and that what he's saying is the way to go. But a righteous man will consider it and make sure he's right before he makes his decision, because he's a man of integrity and he wants to do things God's way. That's what I get out of it. All right, Dave, verse 30, please.
There is no wisdom, nor understanding, nor counsel against the Lord.
No one, regardless of how shrewd or well advised he is, can stand against the Lord.
There is no human wisdom or understanding or counsel that can prevail against the Lord. What comments do we have?
Well, it means, I think, if you think you're smarter than the Lord, you're not.
That's right. I agree.
Never.
God is truth itself, isn't he? He's the ultimate in truth. And he knows, I mean, just within the different churches, they all have a different idea of different things that we read about in the scriptures. And when it's all said and done and the dust settles, as they say, we will find that God knows the truth and he is the truth, the way and the life. And regardless of what each one of us thought, we may or may not be right, we may or may not be wrong. It just depends on how we line up with what his truth is. He has the ultimate say on what is true and what is right. All right, got one more verse. Mr. Dave, verse 31, please.
The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord.
Okay, Josie.
Go ahead and prepare for the conflict, but victory comes from God.
The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance and victory are the Lord. I think they're all basically saying the same thing. We are supposed to prepare, but the ultimate victory is according to God's plan and His will and purpose. And so whenever there is victory, it's because of God. Because sometimes the enemy has better preparations, better tools, better weapons, better whatever, and even though we prepared the best we could and they prepared the best they could, they had an advantage over us. So if we win the victory in that situation, it's because God wanted us to win. But it is everybody's responsibility to do their part in preparing the best they know how. It's like even in healing, when it comes to healing. I have a friend, I haven't seen her in years, haven't talked to her for years. It's been a long time ago. But she had lots of problems physically. And one of them was life-threatening. And she had gone to the doctor for the life-threatening one. And he said everything that he knew to do, now this was a Christian doctor, which was awesome, but he said everything that he knew to do would cause her problems with some of her other issues that would cause them to turn into life-threatening situations. And so he said, I don't know what else to do but to put your life in God's hands. According to medical science, you have 1 month to live. 3 months, and also later on, several years later, she was still teaching school. And she's, so it was in the ultimate victory was in God's hands. In the natural, it didn't look like she would last past a month. But she did. Because it wasn't God's plan for her to go home to be with Him yet. And to God be the glory. Now, whether she was declared healed by doctors, I don't know. All I know is that what looked like a definite death didn't happen. And God gets the glory for that. Hey, do we have any last comments?
Another way of looking at verse 31 is God is wanting us to know that we have already won the battle, but religion has kept us at the first step, has not begun to prepare us for what we need to know in this journey with God. Just like a soldier, before you go on the battlefield, you go to boot camp. In Christians, what's happening to Christians is they say the sinner's prayer and accept Jesus into their hearts and their life, but then they're told to wait for Jesus' return and you're on your way to heaven. So they don't do anything to prepare for what God has for them. They're stuck in the first stage of becoming, a Christian, becoming a soldier for God. They're not doing anything else.
That's a good way to put it. I hadn't thought of it that way. It makes me think of, how can you expect somebody, well, take the subject of math, numbers and stuff. How can you expect a person to learn how to add if they don't even know their numbers? How do you expect a person to know how to subtract if they don't know how to add? How do you expect them to learn how to multiply if they never learned how to add? How do you expect them to learn how to divide if they never learned how to multiply? There's steps to everything that we learn. And if we don't progress in those steps, then we don't get the proper preparation. And then if you turn that into spiritual, you're right. It's good to accept the Lord as your personal Savior, but we need to teach our babies in the Lord how to grow up. And if we haven't been taught how to grow up, that might be tricksy. And so I know for years and years and years, I had accepted Christ as my Savior, but I was a baby in the Lord. There were so many things I had left to learn that I didn't learn until I met and married Chuck. And it's like, wow. And then I realized how much of a baby in the Lord I had been. And, that's not to put me down. It's just nobody taught me. And it's possible that the people I was with didn't know how to teach any further because they'd already taught however far they went. I don't know. But I know that there comes a time when we need to go farther in our learning than what we have, whether you're talking about natural or spiritual. And if you don't, then you can't do the great things God has for you to do until you learn those things. So it might not hurt us to pray every day. Lord, if there's something you want me to learn today that I haven't learned already, please show me and help me learn it. I don't know, but anyway, I want all that God wants me to have. And sometimes when I was a baby in the Lord, I didn't even know to ask that. I didn't know there was more. I thought that was it, because that had been the way I was taught. The person that led me to the Lord, they knew how to lead people to the Lord. They didn't know how to teach them beyond that. So, anyway. Okay, is there anything else that we need to